Hello, everyone. This is a Local 100 Fightback Coalition Facebook live stream event, and we're coming to you tonight on an important day. It's the actual birthday of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and it's important to remember that when framing this discussion about what's going on in this country right now. As many know, we have what has been called the Capitol Riots, an action of domestic terrorism by white supremacist and fascist inspired, violent antisocial supporters of Donald Trump in DC. And there are threats, very real threats, towards politicians, towards communities of color. In the coming days, there's a planned rally this weekend. I believe it's tomorrow in Washington, D.C. And then there's also plans for another mobilization at the inauguration of Joe Biden. So this is far from over. And people wonder, like, why we talk about these political issues and why it's important sometimes to pull back and look at how our fight against the bosses connects to these overall struggles against racism, against injustice, for social justice, etc. And it's the reason why we have to take these things seriously is traditionally there has been a role played by trade unions in the fight against fascism. And this union actually, whatever lack of belief we have in our current leaders, whatever demoralization we have in the current state of our union has played a traditionally very positive role in the fight for civil rights, in the fight against discrimination, not just in terms of race, but in terms of many other things that are a big source of discrimination within this country. And so when we talk about that, we look at the role that our union has played in speaking out against this, in mobilizing concrete, tangible, physical defense, resources, any concrete steps whatsoever in response to this. And basically the response of the union leadership is to do an impression of a zombie. They're sleepwalking. If we didn't know they had a pulse, we would think they were dead. And that's a really dangerous thing for us because they represent us. They are the visible representation of who transit workers are, what they think is in their interest to fight about. And that's really a big problem for us because it sets us up for attack and it isolates us from the very people we should be united in solidarity and struggle with. But I want to open it up for discussion and give other people a chance to give their impressions of what's going on and what they think it means and what they think our union should be doing and how union leadership fits into this overall struggle. So Anthony, would you like to lead off?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry to ambush.
Sure. No. I was actually trying to share the video and reading something. Yeah, this is our fight. I mean, and I know some people have said that it's not our fight, but to be honest, where are you going to go to sit this one out? Yep. There's no place to go to sit this one out. I mean, you can't sit on the sidelines. This is it. Going back to his first year in office, 2017, Donald Trump's first year in office, and with his response to Charlottesville. Charlottesville was organized by a who's who of right-wing, fascist, racist groups that have existed in the United States for quite some time. There were some new groups here. Some of them rebranded themselves, but they're all cut from the same cloth. Whether they want to call themselves KKK or Proud Boys or whatever, or 3 Percenters or Oath Keepers or whatever, they all basically have the same type of philosophy. And Charlottesville was called Unite the Right, and they marched in Charlottesville to prevent the removal of a statue of Robert E. Lee, a proposed removal. They were protesting the proposed removal of a statue of Robert E. Lee. Now, we're the only country that I know of that has statues of traitors, secessionists, people who wanted to hold slaves in a supposedly, you know, free country, in places of prominence in cities throughout the country. And here it is, the 21st century, and most people want to rectify this and want to remove these statues, put them, you know, in museums or schools or places where they can be observed simply as historic relics, rather than have them being in places of honor. And you have these people who are marching there, and when they were marching, the chant that they were saying was, "Jew will not replace us." So you had these anti-Semitic racists who were marching in broad daylight, which they had never dared to do in such a manner, in such a prominent manner, and in such numbers prior to the election of Donald Trump. And if you follow you know, these groups on social media, just a cursory glance, you know, you could spend 10, 15 minutes on their different pages, and you see what they're about and what they think of President Trump, and how they think that, and how they felt that he was their guy. And then to bring it up to now, to what just happened last Wednesday, the people who were arrested, several of them, many of them, said they felt that they were justified in storming the Capitol, and because they felt as if the president invited them there, that's what the president of the United States wanted them to do. You know, so this is something that has never happened in the history of our country. You know, some people, you know, it is not a white person's fight. It is not a black person's fight. It is everyone's fight. And in my view, and this is based on just observing, this is especially a black person's fight, because this is all about the impetus behind all of this that's been happening in the past, I would say 12 years, is black people gaining political power. You know, it's the same thing that's happened every single time that black people have made inroads into any arena in our country. You can, I saw a picture today of Jackie Robinson, and it made me think about, you know, the integration of baseball back in 1947. And, you know, what Jackie had to endure, you know, those first few seasons in the major leagues. And it had absolutely nothing to do with his ability to play baseball, but everything to do with simply the color of his skin. You know, and you had hometown Brooklyn fans who were saying disparaging things about their own player simply because he was black. You know, right here in one of the most supposedly most liberal cities in the country. So this type of racism is everywhere, and there's no place where we could go as black people to sit this one out. There just isn't any place where we could go to sit this one out. We never could sit out any of these things. This is our fight. And as unionists, as being in a trade union, fascism by definition is diametrically opposed to trade unionism. It is about the supremacy of the state and the supremacy of corporations. You know, Donald Trump didn't start this, but he's accelerated it. And he's made something that we wouldn't even dream of being possible in the United States to be acceptable and almost normalized. And we need to stop this. Every one of us needs to oppose it.
Anthony,
someone else could take over.
Yeah, sure, Anthony. But before someone else intervenes, I just want to follow up on your point about why this is our fight and the hold of white supremacy within our class, even and within even our union. And I just want to show people two guideposts of where we're at, right? One of them, most of you would have seen. I'm going to share my screen, by the way. Hold on just a second. So most of you would have seen the Metro North conductor, the Metro North employee who was suspended for taking part in the Capitol riot. And this has been mirrored not just in our unions, but also in FDNY. Many police officers were down there off duty, and we've talked about that in the past, and also the role of military people as well in supporting this. But also another issue is the within our own ranks of our union. I was at Stillwell today, and in the men's bathroom, this is what you'll find on the walls: 1621 DC will be back. And of course, it's characteristic of those who are racist and those who are supporters of fascism. There's homophobic epithets and anti-communism and all of the rest. But this is not, when people think that this is not our fight. We have to be honest with ourselves and deal with who we are as a union, who we are as a class, and what our leadership, the people who say they lead us, are doing to counteract that consciousness. The fact that this could grow and take root in our union, and anybody who's a transit worker, I mean, I don't have to tell you. You can go into cabs. I mean, people talk later about what they've seen, in the cabs. Trump 2020, they're going to send people back to where they came from. All sorts of crazy racist stuff within our own union. And so, the best disinfectant is sunlight. Like, we got to be serious and honest with each other about why this is a cancer upon our union, why the influence of people like this within our union needs to be consciously fought. So I just wanted to make sure that people knew about that and we could discuss it. But who wants to speak next? Is it
I'll
Ray?
go.
Ray, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think especially it's important to hear from this union in this because we are a majority minority union. We have mostly non-white members, and we have a lot already numerous non-white candidates running for the next election and on different slates, and the silence is disturbing because we are people who are going to hear be affected by this. Like even people who are white or could pass for white, it's a thing you have to take a stand on. You can't just sit back and say, "Oh, it's not my fight." You got to take a stance on this because this kind of hatred and bigotry grows when people think it's acceptable, and just by sitting back and not saying anything, you're giving people a pass, and that can't happen because it's just this is not a thing you can have a difference of opinion about with somebody. Just deciding, oh, you can have political differences, but to say no, we have to overturn the election because my guy didn't win is not a difference of opinion. To say that Nazis are right is not a difference of opinion. That's a thing you can't let go.
Yeah. Also, it's not a difference of opinion to think that you can go and you know rain down violence on women of color in the Congress, like, and target them, and target to kill them, to rape them. I mean, does anybody have any illusions that if these people had free reign, these rioters, what they would be capable of? They put a noose outside the Capitol. It's that serious. It's not about free speech. Their speech is hate. Their speech will kill people. That's how serious it is. And you could hear a deafening silence like the echoes in the Grand Canyon from your union leadership. It's absolutely disgraceful. Jonathan, I'm going to want to give you the floor.
Yeah, the only thing I disagree with is the metaphor of zombies, walkers. I think the better metaphor would be they're hiding. They're hiding behind a tree because I remember in 2016 a lot of union leaders expressing fear of their own members, saying, "Well, a lot of our members are Trump supporters." Well, one of the primary beliefs of fascism, authoritarianism, is it shouldn't be democracy in government, and there also shouldn't be democracy in work, at work. And they are against unions. What's the first thing? What's the first thing you think they're going to come after if fascists take over the United States? They're going to go after the unions. The NLRB is going to be disbanded. You know, Unions will be illegal if they had their way.
Yeah. And union activists will be targeted.
Oh yeah.
Tramel, you don't think that this is your fight? You don't think that we have a side in this? You don't think this was an act of domestic terrorism? You don't think that we should be understanding what side we need to be on? Okay, Donald Trump wasn't a victim here. Stop, 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 please. You will be targeted. Wake up. I mean, as much as you've already been targeted, if these people gain influence and power and gain the reins of this country, there is no telling what could happen. And it's very, very dangerous with somebody who puts themselves forward as a potential leader of the whole union, the fourth highest position of power in the union he's running for. And he tells you that Donald Trump, I can't remember when Donald Trump did anything bad to black people. Are you fucking kidding me? Sorry to curse, but seriously, are we in the real world here, Tramel? Really? Or are we in fantasy land? Why are you so soft on Trump? Is it because he's a grifter? Can you relate? Tramel, come on. That's not leadership. It's just not. I'll let other people talk about it, but like, you can't hold the union leadership accountable for their betrayal and their silence, and not hold people who won't put themselves forward to lead the whole union accountable for the role that they play or don't play. Sorry. So further speakers here.
Well,
Anthony.
I just want to, before I get into more criticism about that, more analysis about that whole video, I'm going to say that to everybody else out there who might be watching, is that don't mistake criticism as being full throttle support for the Democratic Party. And look, it's understood that throughout history, and it's well known and it's well documented, that a lot of these movements and a lot of these political parties that sought to bring blacks into these parties or bring blacks into their movements have betrayed them throughout history. It has always happened. So it's like, black people, we really haven't had too many friends other than ourselves in the political arena or in the any other arena other than ourselves in the United States. So, but however, the qualifier is that even though the Democratic Party has not been fully for black people in our causes, and even with a black president, he didn't do as much as he should have or could have. And when I look at Obama, I remember one time when Trayvon Martin was murdered, and may he rest in peace. When Trayvon Martin was murdered, and Obama simply made a comment that if he had a son, he would look like Trayvon. And they jumped all over him for that simple comment. When a young man was murdered, an innocent young man was murdered by some wannabe, neighborhood watch. So even with Obama's tepid approach to civil rights, even human rights, if you look at his overseas record, even with his tepid approach to human rights and civil rights, they called him a communist. They called him a socialist. They said he was stirring up racism. So it's understandable to have animosity, and rightly so, understandable animosity or mistrust towards the Democratic Party. However, Trump is not our friend. And there are many reasons many reasons as a black man to oppose Trump, not just because his approach to his stance on unionism or the Republican Party's stance on unionism. If what you witnessed Wednesday is not enough to let you know the danger that Trump poses, then you're not facing the reality. You're not facing the reality of what it is that's going on. These people have aligned themselves with real life neo-Nazis. Their platform has gone from this Reaganism trickle down, a rugged individualism to straight up and down fascism. It has morphed gradually. It has come to that, and it was headed that way under George W. Bush. It was headed that way with Mitch McConnell in the Senate, but Trump put it on afterburners. He accelerated it, so that what we have right now is we have millions of people right now who think that fascism is the way to go in the United States. And that is as a direct a result of 4 years of Trump that we have this now. So this is the fight of everybody who is really just concerned or even wants freedom, human rights, civil rights, unionism. It's everybody's fight.
Yeah. Thank you, Tony. Jonathan, do you want to get in here?
I don't know if I want to follow that.
Come on, man.
Anthony, you're worse than me in closing down discussion. What's going on, man?
I don't. You know what?
That's
not what my aim at any of this. Because I want to expand the discussion amongst everybody. I want everybody. I even want to know why Trump supporters feel the way they feel, because it's curious to me as to why someone who, you're born here in America. If you know what our ideals are. I'm not going to say what we've done, but what American ideals are. That the justice, fairness. Why do you support Trump? Why do you support a guy who was born rich, who's never worked a day in his life, has a reputation for stiffing, people who's worked for him, has a history of racism dating back to the 1970s when he was sued for discrimination in his apartments. And even today, if you look at like the Coney Island, Brighton Beach area, there's like a line of division there between Blacks and Hispanics and whites. It's like you drive along, Ocean Parkway there, and it's like all of a sudden the neighborhood becomes, white. It changes from Black and Hispanic to white. And that's because of, real estate developers like Trump and what they've done. Yeah. And that's not just him, it's New York City. We live in one of the most cosmopolitan cities in the country, but it's also one of the most segregated. It's like maybe in the last 15 years that you've seen some, movement between these neighborhoods. But for the whole time I've been living here, this has been one of the most segregated cities in the country. And it's because of people like Trump. I mean, his father was a Klansman. His father was a Klansman. His father was a Klansman. He has a history of racism. And he never gave a fuck about whether you're white, Black, or whatever. He never gave a fuck about any working person. And even while he's been in office for the past 4 years, it's bullshit that he tried to bring jobs back to America. Absolute bullshit. Yeah. So it's like, why? I'm curious to hear from Trump supporters. Why do you follow this man? Yeah. I kind of know the reason, but I want to hear them articulate it. Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, like we've been trying for a while to get people to call in. We want to talk to you live. You can give us send us a text, 917-678-0557. Give us a number where we can reach you. We'll put you on the air live, because Anthony's exactly right. We want to hear from you, no matter what you want to contribute. We got to have this dialogue. We got to have this discussion. And just speaking about what Anthony was talking about with Coney Island, like that area, like I go by there every day because I work on the F line now, so I see Trump Village all the time. And like the segregation that he's talking about, like let's remember that Trump, when you applied to get into those housing, they put a C on your name if you on your application if you were black. They systematically discriminated against black families to get in there in the first place, and they paid massive fines long after that didn't really compensate the people who were discriminated against. Then Anthony talks about New York being segregated. The New York City public school system, wait for it, is more segregated than Mississippi or Alabama during Jim Crow. That's how bad things are. And education goes with property taxes. If you live in a black neighborhood and that's not, extremely well to do, you're going to have shitty schools. And it trickles down every aspect of our lives. So also Anthony was talking about, well, why do you support somebody like this? As a working class person, he hates everything you are as a human being. He hates your family. He hates your culture. He stiffed Polish undocumented immigrants who built Trump Tower, and he called INS on them and had them fucking deported. This is the kind of morally depraved person we're talking about. He despises everything you're about. So where does the support for Trump come from? Right? It comes from the fact that he hates the same people that many of the people who support him hate. And that's where the unity comes from. And we got to break any idea that working class people have anything in common with the ruling class, with the billionaire class who hate us. And we have to build class solidarity to counteract the poison of chauvinism and racism and support for imperialism. And that's where we get the guys scrolling stuff on the wall at Stillwell saying we'll be back with a threat of antisocial racist violence. They think it's their role to be shock troops in this fight to reestablish order. It's very dangerous if that's allowed to go uncounted. So that's why this is so important. Ray, did you want to get in here? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's yeah, you mentioned Tramel's last broadcast, and I think anybody who actually goes and furthers this bullshit lie that the election was rigged and that Trump was robbed should not be holding any office. And if you're just saying it to get clicks and to get people to donate to you, then you definitely don't belong in office, because you're just a cynical sellout who will say and do anything just to get people to pay attention to you. But to just if you do believe it, how can we trust you to run? Would you? People already have enough time believing the outcome of our elections because they just so heavily try to keep people from voting. How could you support somebody who says, I don't support other elections, which are very well documented as being safe and are very difficult to rig? And how could that person possibly hold office in this union?
I think I think it's because Tramel, I think, went on with this topic of, was Trump railroaded? I think that, and I'm theorizing here, I think that that was done for entertainment purposes. Looking at white people, like what's going on among the colonizers, among the oppressors, like are they eating their own now? And I think it was a topic that was probably fun to listen to get clicks. But if you're going to run for the top four to lead this union, I think you now have to be careful with what you say, because you want to run for administrative vice president. You're not a podcast host anymore. Now you want to showcase yourself as a union leader, and as a union leader, you have to talk to the members and say, this is our fight. We should be anti-fascist. We're a mostly Black, Latino, Southern Asian labor union, and this is our fight. Instead of going off and saying, was Trump railroaded at union? If you're going to run for office, union members that listen to that and hear you wonder, was Trump railroaded? What are they going to think? Are they going to think, well, are you pro-Trump? Are you against Trump? Are you pro-Trump? Are you anti-Trump? What, you support Trump? Like, what?
Yeah.
What's your position here? You have to take a position.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, I mean, the reason why it's important is because these are very disorienting times, right? And people need to be able to look to leaders for concrete next steps.
Right.
The leaders that understand the seriousness of the crisis that we face right now. We've all faced this with COVID, right? We have a life and death struggle that we all face. Part of the problem with the leadership that we have is that they don't understand the scale of the crisis we face, and they don't have any solutions for that crisis. So, Trammell, how can you have solutions for Trump and Trumpism if you can't call out which side you're on? And in fact, if you sell Trump's lies, he sold talking points about the deep state, about, oh, if there was a coup, it was a coup against Trump. I mean, people like armed with racist hatred and armed with real arms went to the Capitol trying to overthrow the democratically elected government of the United States. Okay? There were people like AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and others, people who, you know, you may not have any trust in the Democratic Party overall, but there's a reason to distinguish between people like them and people like Nancy Pelosi and Schumer and Biden and all the rest. Think, what would have happened if they got in that chamber and they were able to isolate AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar? They would have lynched them. It's that serious. And it's a test of all anything we go through as a society, anything we go through as a union. It's a test of leadership. It's a test of who understands the moment and who can organize a defense. We're a self-defense organization of the whole class, of every oppressed and exploited person in this country. Our union has a stake in that. We have a side in that. And, you know, Trammell, you're worried about Candace Owens. You're worried about talking about being able to be independent and objective and truth-based, and you want to be free to tell us that Candace Owens is right. Come on. I mean, if you're of somebody who's a Black person in this union, do you want a leadership that wants to be free to sell the lies of Candace Owens? I mean, really, like this is the kind of leadership we need. That's not fact-based. I'm sorry. That's not objective. Those are lies. Those are lies. And we expect leaders that don't push those kind of lies. I'm sorry. Further speakers here. Sorry to take them.
Wow, you mentioned Candace Owens. Wow. You know, I rarely watch her because she's so full of, you know, just it's just nothing. She's, how can I put this politely? She's being paid by people to further an agenda, to further, you know, this idea that you know, everything that happens to Black people in this country is their fault. You know, and everything that she says or whatever is geared towards that really one ethos, that one idea, that you know, Black people just don't try hard enough in this country. And you know, I look at my experience in this country, my family's experience in this country. You know, my mother was a well-educated woman. My mother, not generations ago. You know, and she had a degree in biology and chemistry with a minor in math. She came to New York, the most liberal country in the city in the country, and was told at hospitals that they don't hire Black people here. And this was just, you know, my mother. This isn't, we're not talking about, you know, my great grandmother or whatever. You know, she talks about her father who came from the farm or whatever and worked hard and did all this stuff. every black person in America works hard. Every person in America, has to work hard. No, it's not even a question about that. It's a question of, do you have access? And then she wants to talk about, she mentioned something, because like I said, I rarely watch her. She mentioned something that I saw recently about how she said that, as a group, African immigrants from Africa seem to outperform, other ethnic groups, and African Americans, even white Americans, in terms of income and jobs that they get, as far as, and in education, and what she fails to mention, see, when people talk about statistics, when you look at statistics, it really is just a measure, but there's other variables that affect those statistics. It's kind of like, when you have something like a vaccine for polio. You could go back in the 1930s and say, well, 2 out of every 10 kids contracted polio. Now it's 0 out of every 10. And what's the variable in that statistic? You have a vaccine. You introduce the variable. The variable with, African immigrants coming to this country and outperforming people education-wise, and in some cases with income, is that they, in order to come to this country, they have to prove that they can support themselves. And most of them are educated already before they come here. And that goes for almost every immigrant from any country that's not a white country. And they weren't even allowed to come over here in mass numbers before 1965, before you had laws passed that removed those barriers and those quotas from black countries. So it's like she uses that to say that if it was about race, then why are Africans doing so well? Well, why do wealthy people send their children to Montessori preschools and places like that? Why do they do that? Do poor people have access to that type of, preschool education or whatever? And look at what happens when I don't agree with de Blasio on everything that he said, and he's far from a true progressive. But look at what the criticism of de Blasio when he introduced universal pre-K in New York City. They called him a radical communist socialist just for something like that, to give the advantage to largely black and Latino kids in this city, that rich people just is an automatic for them, because they know and they understand the importance of early childhood education. So it's like, why would you give oxygen or even validation to someone like Candace Owens, who's employed by, an organization called Turning Point, that furthers this propaganda? It's really anti-black propaganda being pushed by a black person. And today is Martin Luther King's birthday. You can go back and you can look and you could see that the establishment actually put up black people, black pastors and reverends, to counter Martin Luther King, to say that there was nothing wrong with America even back then. So it's the same thing. It's the same playbook and the same bullcrap that we're going through now, even when all the evidence is right in front of your face and everything that she says is easily countered, but she says it convincingly. Why? Why would you give that any oxygen?
Yeah. And then the other thing too is that of all the narratives you want to push to potentially educate working class people, this is the narrative you're going to push. You're going to push her justifications for a lot of the very vicious, hateful stuff she says about the black community. Is that the role of leadership? Is that the kind of leadership we need to amplify voices who are paid for by the Coke? They're paid.
I wanted to.
Yeah.
No, I wanted to add a little something that I got all, when I was talking about my personal story, is that my wife is an immigrant from Haiti. And it's like, there's no difference in the way you're going to be treated, whether you're an immigrant from any other. If you're black in this country. You know, so Candace Owens is full of shit. You know, my wife she came here when she was 15 from Haiti. And she was educated here, did very well, you know, has degrees. And she never heard someone address her with the N-word until we moved here to Staten Island, when someone called her that. You know, so it's like you can't escape it. You know, so what is Candace Owens talking about? You know, it's a subject for another live stream to talk about what goes on here on Staten Island and the politics here on Staten Island. But it doesn't matter where you're from. If you're black, you know, in almost anywhere in the world, you face anti-blackness. So Candace Owens is like, it's a non-starter. It's like, yeah.
You don't have to sell us, Tony. By the way, Umberto, I wanted to welcome Umberto Rodriguez, who's joining us late due to family responsibilities. And, you know, I just want to give you a chance to chime in on some of the discussion. We were talking about Tramell Thompson of Progressive Action's recent live stream. You know, if you had comments about that or anything else, if you want to get in discussion.
I'm sure you guys addressed it. I'm just shocked to hear we giving Candace Owens airtime, any kind of energy.
I know.
It's a waste of time. Like, I don't.
Yes.
Even if she might say one thing correct, which I've never heard her say anything correct, she doesn't get any credit for saying one thing right. You know, she's just a clout chaser. Like, she's just a contrarian, just to be a contrarian. And I don't know, it's a waste of energy to mention her name. Like, I don't even. Also, I came in, I was like, what?
Yeah. But, sorry, we got to talk about this, Umberto. You know, but unfortunately, the person who we're talking about is you know, putting themselves forward as a major, you know, leader within the union, and you know, he feels that it's important to amplify her lies, and I think that's the problem. So that's why we raised.
Oh, no. Yeah. No, I mean, there's no, like I said, anybody, black or white, should support what Candace Owens says. She's a cancer to. I don't really want to use that term, but she's just vitriol. She's just poisonous to any kind of sound logic or creative, you know, critical thinking. Like, that doesn't exist in her vocabulary. She just throws words around and just tries to arouse people with I don't know, these terms, or these, you know, people like the stuff because I don't know why people like the stuff she says. People are like, oh, well, she says something that it makes sense. It's like, no, it doesn't make sense, man. She's reaching to the lowest common denominator with her stuff. So I wouldn't give her any energy. It's just shame anybody would. And I think there was a post before on Progressive Action. Somebody posted one of her quotes and like, oh, she had so much to say that's correct. And I'm like, no, she didn't. And people actually defending her, and it makes no sense. But I don't like putting energy into her.
I understand.
It fucking pisses me off. So I'm pardon my French.
Oh, that's okay.
It upsets me when they even mention her. Like, she shouldn't be in any discussion when it comes to talking about race in America.
So I mean, white people like what she says because she gives them cover. It's the "I have a black friend" defense.
Yeah,
you can't
true.
be racist if a black person said the same thing, even though it's still racist.
Yeah. Well, actually, there's a long history of that in America, in particular, when Bill Cosby said stuff about the black community, you know, basically blaming black people for their own oppression. He said he didn't want to hear about white racism anymore. That he wanted to put all the blame on the community. You know, when somebody like that, who is so visible, and who's black, says things and regurgitates talking points of white racists like Bill O'Reilly and Rush Limbaugh, you know, and Newt Gingrich and all the rest of these people, then they can say, see, I'm not racist. Bill Cosby says it. Candace Owens says it. You know, and it does a lot of damage, you know, in terms of giving them more oxygen and giving them credibility.
I'm sorry, Jonathan, go ahead.
Yeah, or they take Martin Luther King out of context.
Oh no, that's the oldest. Like, I mean, one thing, like, respectability is something that people always want to bring up, and it's because we're not respectable that we get treated a certain way. And it's like, no, it's racism. And Even, I mean, you talk about MLK, like they say in the civil rights, there's a meme where they show the civil rights activists of yesteryear or whatever. They were in suits and stuff. And today we don't, so it's like this whole respectability thing. And it's like, no, like, even if you're wearing a suit, they're still going to fucking drag you out on the street and shoot you or spray you with the hose or so respectability is bullshit. Like, at the end of the day, we have to tackle racism. Respectability doesn't win us anything. And that's shown time and time again. Minister. Yeah, it's time and time again. Like, respectability doesn't win us anything. Even now, with the whole issue with the Soho Karen, the lady in the hotel with the cell phone, and the first thing they say is, well, the father was a jazz musician. It's like, it shouldn't matter if he's a jazz musician or if he's no, for real. Like, the respectability that really pisses me off. People say just because he's a jazz musician that he should be respected and this shouldn't happen to him. But it's like, no, it shouldn't happen to anybody, whether you're a jazz musician or you're whatever whatever your profession is or whatever. If you don't work at all, but the respectability really pisses me off. Yeah. And that whole thing, they always say the son of a jazz musician. It's like, well, he just plays the saxophone. It shouldn't matter what his profession is. It's racism, and we have to get past that.
So Umberto, I wanted to give you time because you hadn't had a chance to do it earlier, but like, what do you think about, like, for example, I know Evangeline Baez has said that she didn't think it was our fight to be on the streets. Like, 59th Street Columbus Circle was going to be a rally. The Proud Boys had called for a rally in New York specifically to attack Blacks and Latinos and immigrant communities and terrorize them. And then there was counter-protests mobilized for people to not allow them to go uncounted. And Evangeline's argument was, don't give it oxygen, let the white racists who created this problem up the mess, right? And let them deal with it. It's not our fight. So what do you think about that? I mean, like, I think obviously there's a background to it, and she's coming from a perspective that's different from me. So I just wanted to know what you thought of.
I know we debated this a lot before this, and I mean, it's something that's very nuanced, and I can see her logic, and I understand that. Like I said, I was saying, maybe we don't need to be out there and put ourselves in danger, and that's understandable. But I think it's still important to call this out, and we still have to put energy towards fighting this. I think that's important as well. But I understand Evangeline's position. Like I said, but I would say it's still important that we call it out and call it what it is. And yeah, at the same, I do agree that they always ask Black and brown people to we have to solve this shit. We have to fight against racism. It's like, no, why do we have to do that? Why can't people in the community? Why can't white people tell their family members don't do this? You know what I'm saying? So I mean, it's a concerted effort, obviously. But I understand Evangeline's stance, but I also think that being passive is not going to get us anywhere. But at the same time, we do need white folks to go out there and call out their own as well. Like, I mean, it's cool with people calling out their parents who are at the Capitol building. I seen the girl call our whole family, and that's what we need to do. That we're gonna have to do that. Like, you're gonna have to have these conversations at home with your family members or your friends. I think that's important as well. But no, I also think the counter protests are important. Like, we don't negotiate with racists and Nazis, man. Like, that's something we can't be passive to. But I understood her stance.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reason why I bring it up is because there's one perspective, right, of you as a person. Like, I've been at anti-fascist protests almost my entire life. I've been at anti-police brutality rallies where you had to go head to head with the cops and stuff like that. As an individual, the last thing I want to do is put myself in that potential danger, right? But on the other hand, as a union, as somebody who's running for leadership in a union, it's one thing what you would tell an individual to do. It's another thing what role a union needs to play in providing a visible, tangible self-defense. Think about it this way. 59th Street, Columbus Circle, you say this is not your fight. You say this is not something we need to be on the battle lines about. Well, if the Proud Boys come or other fascist psychotic forces come to New York City looking to start trouble and there's no counter protest, do you think that they're not going to find the Black people and the Latino people and the immigrants and whoever else they want to target venom towards in that community? And oh, by the way, there's a train station at 59th Street, Columbus Circle. oh shit, maybe they could target the 77% Black and Latino union. And that matters. Like, we have to think about that from a trade union perspective. Despite all of the mistrust we may have, like, unions have to be on the front lines of the struggle. There was I don't know if you guys, if people who are watching this would know, but there was an anti-fascist league built in the United States, especially in the Midwest, to staunch the rise of Nazism within, like, Skokie, Illinois. I mean, you can just Google this. Like, it was all across the Midwest. There's a long history of it in the Pacific Northwest as well, and there's like vicious, like back and forth, like battles between anti-fascist forces and fascist forces in this country. And the outcomes of those battles made a difference in terms of what kind of country we became. Because just because we are where we are now doesn't mean that's where we were destined to be. It's the class struggle and the fight against a lot of this reaction that tells the tale of what kind of world we're going to live in. And so that's where I was looking at it from. Not to try to criticize somebody for their justified feelings of, I don't want to, we don't want to be involved in this, and they're just stirring up trouble and we want to avoid this. I completely understand that. But as a union leader, it's a different perspective, and so that's where we have to.
I feel you, and I think just like when we say, we have members sometimes that say, well, we're not worried about issues outside of the union. Like, we need to focus on union issues and work issues and issues that occur on the job. But it's like, no, like, we have to put our energy towards making sure everybody gets what they deserve, whether it's our union members or our people that aren't part of the union. Like, it's important as a human, it's important that we put forth our energy against all struggles, because otherwise we wouldn't be here, if people didn't do it. We stand and show the people that did it for us. So it's important that we do that. So I think along the same line, where we can't just focus on the issues that are in front of us at our job. We have to work focus. And like I said, I see I debate cats at the job a lot about that. They're saying, well, we need to worry about our raises and our health insurance. So yeah, well, we can actually focus on that and police brutality and whatever else, so it's interesting that people think that we can't do both, but I think it's important that we put our energies towards stuff outside of the job as well, and I mean, that's not to say that stuff at the job is not important, that's obviously not what I'm saying. People see it that way. People see it as you can't multitask,
Yeah. Well, I always find it hilarious when people talk about making sure I get my next raise or making sure we fight about the things at work. These are fascists, man. You're not gonna have a union if these people succeed. Like, really, like take a step back and think about the consequences. Like, how could you not see that this is your fight and that it has to be your fight? How could you want leaders who think that it's okay to be missing in action for months at a time, while the rise of this is predictable. We've seen this coming. I mean, you'd have to be asleep not to see this coming. It's been coming for decades. Where the hell is our union leadership? Where are they? So further speakers, we need to wrap up soon, just so everybody knows. Probably about 5 or 10 minutes at the most. Jonathan, go ahead.
So I think people would give Trump a pass and give airtime to people like Candace Owens. Need to remember what vehicle unions serve to blacks and Latinos towards income equality. And the reason why before the TWU was formed, black people in New York City were only allowed to be what was known then as porters. They only allowed them to clean stations. That was it. They didn't allow black people to drive trains, to work in the towers. It's because of unions. Unions fought for this equality. Because of unions, when you go into a tower, you see, I come to work and I'm the only white guy there. And it's the workplace is diverse, where anyone can take a civil service exam and become a train operator, become a conductor, and make 70, $100,000 or $100,000 a year, depending on how much overtime you want to do. But before unions, Black people weren't even allowed to run the trains and buses.
Yeah, that's important to know that history. And anybody wanna speak before we wrap up, Anthony?
He's muted. He's muted.
And
Okay, now I'm no longer muted.
Thank you.
Unions have played a huge role in the civil rights struggle, but we also got to remember that in some instances they didn't play that role. Right. Up until the 60s, a lot of unions didn't accept Black members. When you mentioned about only being porters, the Philadelphia Transit Union during the height of World War II shut down the transportation in Philadelphia because Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed an executive order that any business that is doing business with the federal government had to hire and promote Black people. And the Philadelphia transit system hired 8 Black men to be trolley car operators and drivers. And because of that, there was a wildcat strike that shut down, transportation in Philly, which was a major port in the war effort during World War II. And there's several instances, of that nature within unions and within that happened over the course of American history, involving unions and them shutting out Black people. And even today in our union, you see the leadership is a lot of white people there, and it's mind-boggling to me. It's like we're 70-something%, Black union. RTO is I would wager to guess is probably somewhere between 85 and 90% Black, and yet nobody up there from RTO. And it's like, I wonder why that is. And even, when we did that, when I did one of these virtual meetings when they were talking about the budget cuts with the MTA board, and I think I may have screenshotted the screen, but everybody there, I mean, it was stark. Just when you guys were talking about it, and when Trammell was talking about it, on the other videos or whatever about how white the board members and the leadership is, it didn't really register until I looked at my screen and saw just all white faces except for the one Asian guy. And it's like, why is this occurring in the 21st century? Racism is very much alive. And with our union, it's like, we have to understand that we are very much in this fight, and every one of us has to understand that this is our fight. It can't be hammered home more that if we allow fascists, if we allow people like Trump to continue to push what their agenda, there will not be a union. When you talk about doing things for Black people, somebody doing things for Black people, it's been my experience and my observation that we have done the most for ourselves in this country. Every single organization, every single entity in this country that has been integrated, it was integrated because of the efforts of Black people and the pushes that we made ourselves. It wasn't because of Trump or any politician or anybody, even in history, that has done anything for Black people. If they did do it, it was because they were pushed that way by Black people. And we are a Black union. I'm sitting here with three white guys, well, 2 white guys and a couple of Hispanics on this live stream, but this is a Black union. And we have to push this, you know. And I'm only here with you guys because I know you guys see that and you guys understand that even though this is a black union, that this is everybody's fight, and that being anti-racist benefits everybody. And even though you guys may be socialists, this is an American ideal. Yeah.
Well,
Well, it's an ideal, not a reality. It's
Right,
an
exactly.
ideal, but not a reality. Yeah.
Well, but the other thing though too is that like the ideals, like when we say American ideals, right? Like, why does it have such a hole for an immigrant to believe in freedom and democracy and all of the things that this country says goes around the world and says that it's for? The more they promise it, the more those who are oppressed cling to that and want to make it real. And throughout the history of this country, it has been those most oppressed, those doubly and triply oppressed by racism, sexism, homophobia, etc., that have dragged this country to live up to those ideals. So when you say American ideals, which Americans are we talking about? American working class ideals, American oppressed people's ideals, not the Trumps of the world. And, you know, we shouldn't be selling Trump's narrative. We should be selling the narrative of the people who built this country and the people whose values represent our values. And that's why it's important. Anthony.
Yeah, and you know, just to build on what you were saying about it, to juxtapose what Trump says as far as the reality of why we had advancement in this country. And it's like unions were at the forefront of pushing this. People who were oppressed, as you just said, were the ones who pushed this forward. And it's got to be that way now. Trump right now, he said just a couple of weeks ago that the Republican Party has now become the party of the working men. And that is patently false. That is an out and outright lie. And the reason why he can even try to make that claim and have people believe it is because despite what people may think, you know, they're calling people like Joe Biden communists or leftists or whatever. Despite those accusations, the Democratic Party, as it exists today, really hasn't had many people who have pushed forth those ideals or represented the working class. So it's a lie that Trump is able to hold on to or push, because we really haven't had people that have been countering that or really standing up for the working class. And this union has to start doing that. We have to stop being a boss-owned union and being a union that is run and owned by the people who it represents.
And also, I mean, it's also about housekeeping, cleaning up our own house, right? Like, we have a union that thinks and acts and functions like the boss. They are corrupt. They are out and out corrupt. They hold power on the basis of voter suppression. Sound familiar? Well,
Yep.
You know, the way they think is not so different than Trump. I'm not saying Tony Utano is a Trumpster. I'm not saying that he's a racist or anything like that. But I'm saying that the way in which they think, they are perfectly okay with being the president of an overwhelmingly Black and Latino union on the basis of 28% of the vote. They're perfectly okay with sending ballots to the wrong address to make sure the people who won't vote for them, who don't like them, who are alienated from them. Tony, think about why they're alienated from them. Just a thought. You might want to think about that. As the white leader of an overwhelmingly Black, an immigrant union, you might want to think about that. You know, like, if you're okay with it, then we're not okay with you, and we can't be. And we got to stop functioning with the baggage of yesterday and mirroring what the bosses do and how they conduct themselves. Or we're never going to be a union we can be proud of. We're never going to be a union that we see ourselves in. We're never going to have our voices heard. That's why it's so important. Anybody else want to speak before we wrap up? Umberto, go ahead.
Yeah, I think going back to Jonathan, he was speaking about the history of unions and the porters. And I guess we didn't mention the Pullman porters, who were majority black and weren't allowed into the white union. So A. Philip Randolph, who's usually kind of written out a lot of the history, was a very important figure. He was responsible for creating the union and pretty much one of the bigger unions, and then also fighting for collective bargaining. So I guess it's important that we highlight A. Philip Randolph and the Pullman porters, who are very valuable in history. Like I said, once again, it's another story of blacks not being allowed, so creating their own lane, and unfortunately the unions turned them away, but he was able to create his own. And unfortunately, most of the aspects with integration came a lot of these organizations, kind of vanished because of that. And it's important that we highlight these histories. It's very important.
Yeah.
And of course, I think another reason why Randolph is generally moved out of it or erased out of a lot of history is because of his socialist leanings. We see that a lot. So, I mean, they tend to highlight MLK, who was, one of Randolph's people. If they were saying that Randolph couldn't be there, therefore they brought in MLK to do the boycott. So, these people worked in the same circles. We know that MLK had a lot of leftist, socialist people in the circle. And those things are generally, like I said, a lot of times they whitewash a lot of this history because of that, because of this fear of socialist fear, and like you said, and most concepts or most movements that started came from the left, and they were considered radical at the time.
Yeah.
And as time goes on, they start becoming more, not to become moderate, but they become accepted by the mainstream, and they eventually get co-opted. So it makes it seem as if the mainstream always wanted these ideas. They didn't. Even MLK, who's been whitewashed, was hated at his, at the time, at his, during his height. He was hated by most of America. If he was out now, he would have been, Fox News would have been going in on him. But anyway, so I think it's important.
Yeah.
Was that
happened?
Exactly? He was anti-war. He was, pro-socialist. He was a lot of things that they don't agree on. They kind of tend to not talk about when they talk about MLK. And that's actually his birthday. It's Monday's MLK Day.
Today is his birthday, by the way.
Okay, today's his birthday, yeah. So we're observing on Monday, right? So yeah, it's interesting how they whitewash people once they pass, and they change the narrative and they change the story. Yeah. And they want to put this Malcolm Martin, this dichotomy, which is ridiculous. Everything's nuanced, nothing's black and white.
Yeah.
But they always want to create this dichotomy, and that's not how things work. But I think it was important that we talk about A. Philip. He doesn't really get much talk. His importance to the unions, especially black and brown members of railroad unions, which is very important. Right. And they don't talk. They talk about Mike Quill, and no disrespect to Mike Quill, but we never hear about the black and brown people. People that got him here. So, on the eve of MLK Day, on his birthday, definitely respects to A. Philip Randolph.
Yeah. Oh, and just to highlight a point that Umberto raised, all you right-wingers that are trolling our feed right now, and all of you that hate the message that we're getting out there, look up Red Mike Quill, communist. Look up how the Teamsters were founded. They were founded by Trotskyists from Minneapolis, who led a general strike in that city that unionized all of trucking in the entire country. Okay, so let's mystify the idea that they represent the tradition. The right-wingers, the nationalists, the racists represent the tradition of trade unions, and that they built anything. They destroyed everything. People like me, people like Jonathan, people like Seth, communist ideas, socialist ideas, built this union. Y'all don't believe in socialism? Are you guys giving up on Social Security? Are you giving up on Medicare? Are you against the fire department? Are you against public water, public education? Well, okay, yeah, we found something they probably would be against. But in any case, we have to wrap up. We try to keep this, about a little more than an hour, because people got lots of things to do. We're going to be having live streams soon. We're going to be doing one. We're trying to do one with nurses and other medical workers talking about the COVID-19 vaccine and the fight against COVID. And we hope people will call in on that. We'll be advertising that in advance. Also, this weekend, I'm going to be doing an update as one of your Local 100 Executive Board members, Conductor Towers, giving an RTO update about things that are going on in RTO. and also planning for the next executive board meeting and motions that we will be raising there related to issues that our members are facing right now. So look for that, and we'll look forward to talking with all of you soon. And the comments never end. Facebook is forever. Well, at least at least it looks like that. I mean, Facebook live streams.
Until you get banned, yeah.
Yeah, until you get banned. You know, until you say something they don't like. That's a whole different story. But I've been in Facebook jail many times, so I can relate. But yeah, but what I meant was the Facebook comments go on, so you don't have to feel like the discussion is ever over. So everybody have a great weekend, have a great night, and we'll be talking to you real soon. Thanks so much for joining us. For those of you that did, share out the stream, please. Let people know if you took the time to watch it. It's likely that your coworkers, your family members, other workers would be interested. Share out the stream and help us try to build a wider discussion. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. Have a good night, guys.
Good night.
Be safe.
Good night.
Take care.